Hello, um, my name's Andy Ash, and I've agreed to talk a little bit about the work, the teaching I've been doing during the COVID. Um, Goes without saying, it's not been an easy time, but I work for UCL, and so I teach postgrad. That didn't really sort of get stopped or didn't really have a moment or a space. We just went straight from Friday, nobody's allowed on the campus, students are to go home, to Monday morning, starting everything online. We finished off the term online without a break. The continuity was kind of as pretty much seamless. And then we spent the Easter break preparing the new term and the new master's modules. So that was quite difficult, obviously, but interesting, in many ways. The bit I want to talk about is what I actually did in terms of my own practice and in terms of my own making. So I live alone in a one-bed flat, and so I didn't go out. I isolated all the time for a number of reasons. So actually making art, the opportunities for making art meant that I couldn't go to my studio. I have a studio not too far. It's about a 10-15 minute sort of cycle ride in Portslade. But I chose not to go, and only in the last couple of weeks have I been able to go back to the studio and to some of the work that I've been sort of making. So, COVID meant that pretty much most of what I did was here on this balcony, in these seats, looking out that window, looking at what happens in the street, in the sort of area around the building, and also in the sort of 360 around the flat. I'm on the top floor, the sixth floor, so I've got pretty much a good sort of vantage point from the sort of Brighton Beach in front of me, the city to the sort of left side, and then towards the back, the South Downs. So I took this as an opportunity to think about the isolation and to think about the personal isolation, the sort of national sort of isolation, but also the view, or shall I say views, and the literal interpretation of views, i.e. the vista, i.e. the visual, but also the personal, the sort of the perspectives, the thinking on the views of on the situation. And so I made a series of Instagram daily records of views from my window, isolation art views, and that was during the lockdown, the daily routine of getting up, looking out the window, looking at what's happening, thinking about how I felt, thinking about what people were doing, and thinking about what was happening in the community, and more closely related to what I can see there. And so that was kind of intriguing in all sorts of ways.
I spent the month before lockdown away from the UK. So all of February, I was in Japan. I'd been invited to take part, to lead on a residency at Tsukuba University. Tsukuba is about sort of 30 kilometers just north of Tokyo. And I've been invited to show some of my own work, to exhibit at the T Plus Gallery, and to work with a range of postgraduate and undergraduate artists from across the world. So I kind of watched COVID develop from afar through the eyes of another nation before returning in early March. So the teaching the residency was focused on interactions, on collaboration, on dialogue, and sort of meaning making through the studio practice. It's very exciting and really interesting to be able to show my own work as the sort of basis for some of these things that we're thinking about. And I was using the sort of work that I was making from the walking pedagogy series of things. Little did I know that these kinds of concepts and ideas of face-to-face working and studio-based collaborating, etc., would be so abruptly stopped. And obviously, when I returned to the UK, I returned to a very different situation.
So being indoors all those months and spending your time looking out and watching and observing does drive you a little bit crazy and makes you feel a little bit more anxious about being indoors than normal anyway. I suffer with claustrophobia, so it's not great being stuck inside all the time. But it did, I suppose the positive is it did make me work slightly differently. It did sort of make me think about using the minimum amount of materials and equipment to make things. I wouldn't have spent that much time ever. I think I did spend something like over 60 odd days documenting each day. I can't imagine I would have set myself that task if I hadn't been forced into it. And in terms of I suppose an uptake, is it's given me now that I am out, it's given me a different sort of impetus to sort of to make now and to do things now. So I am back in the studio, but I'm also back out walking in the hills and on the downs. So another positive, I suppose, is the pace of COVID. It went from being very manic, really long days sitting in a chair, really sort of intense learning and developing new skills and trial and error with the teaching online, to a point where time changed. And so a positive has been that I don't commute for over 3 hours a day, so I've got slightly different understanding of the day and time. I can now get up and sit in front of the computer to teach in a pair of shorts and no socks, and I don't need to necessarily be so weighed down by getting somewhere and being somewhere on time. You're always on time when you're no more than about 20 foot away from the computer. I suppose also I like walking. I think if you've got more control of pace and time, you tend to be able to see things slightly differently. So the beauty of walking is you get a long time to look at something as you approach it. You get to see it in lots of different perspectives, because you're only going to get to it at 3 miles an hour. And so there's lots of opportunity to see it, to look at it. But likewise, to look back, to see where you've been and how that changes as you move at 3 miles an hour away from it. Passing things 3 miles an hour as well as you walk is a kind of a nice way of seeing things. It gives you more time to study and to take in and to think about. So more time to think about your relationship to it and how you move in the space around it. So I think one of the positives about COVID is it's given people a bit of space and a bit of time, and I think that's kind of been maybe a useful opportunity for all, just to sort of take stock, think about where you're going, think about how you're getting there, as opposed to before. So I think the last time we met as a group in a Zoom meeting was sort of maybe March time, can't remember, but I gave a presentation where I was talking about unlearning and relearning, the importance of change, and seeing this moment as a kind of key seminal opportunity for change. And it kind of went down to like a lead balloon, and there was only one comment in the chat that just sort of simply summarized it by saying too soon, question mark. And maybe at that point it was too soon, but I think now we should really be thinking very hard about, when we go back, about the orthodoxy that's dominated for a generation of kids, about the odd ideas of school art that are made, and the process, the pedagogy, the ways that people have taught. These things have got to change. I've been saying it for a very long time, but maybe now is the time where people will be more willing to embrace and to think differently.